The
So
fourth
will
quarter
the
numbers will be terrific,
exactly
and it will start to play out throughout the year per se. When I say 1% over the course of next 4 quarters.
right?
So broadly, it would be more front ended, and the impact will just wane gradually as we move into the second, third. So if the first quarter was expected to be a blockbuster north of 20% sort of a growth when you compare it to the base of FY21,
Yes, sir.
probably you will see something like 17-18%. So that's how it's going to basically look like. I think the first quarter numbers estimates for this for India was around 26%. 26% because the last year's base had simply collapsed. First quarter's real GDP should be north of 20%. Against that, you will see maybe 2-3%. It's you know, that
Sure.
that that gets you. The entry barriers in an injectables business is very high because you require much better capabilities in manufacturing than what is required for oral dosage, the pills that we take through our mouth,
Right.
as against injectables which we intravenous, which
Right.
goes through under the skin.
Right.
So, there's a very high entry barrier. It's not everybody's cup of tea. In India, there are players like your Aurobindo or Dr. Reddy's. Gland Pharma is one of them. And Gland Pharma basically was a domestic local pharmaceutical company which was bought over by Fosun, and which is a very large pharmaceuticals players in China. They have a very large pharmaceutical. So now Fosun has bought over this company. It's primarily a Chinese company. But basically, the entire business is exports coming out of the US. And its turnover is not very high currently. It's just about 3,300 odd crores out of a turnover that this company is doing. Bulk of the turnover is basically coming from the US. The size of the US opportunity is huge because the number of players are very small, and that too having you know having actually got audited by the US FDA, which itself is a big pain point, at least for Indian pharmaceutical companies. They have so many of 483s, etc., getting issued for
Right.
Indian players.
Right.
I think in its history, a gland has never got a US 483, US FDA 483. So, and if they were very minor, and it's got resolved. And now with the injectables market, there are a number of medicines which are actually going off patent. When this goes off patent, there is a case for injectables player to have generics of those injectables. And those guys who have capabilities can only have the uh, that cake belongs to these players only. You can't have a new entrant come through and grab this share as opposed to the oral dosage. So in this space, you have Gland as one of the formidable players. That gives the visibility in terms of the growth. They're already leaders in heparin, globally. So that's one of the. So similarly, going forward, you'll have even newer molecules come to it. They have a cramps business as well. Where they do. So the size of the US opportunity is there. The size of the Chinese opportunity is equally big, if not bigger than US. And since now Fosun is a Chinese company, they will want to leverage capabilities of Gland Pharma for the Chinese market, which is a total virgin territory as of. You can just imagine the growth if the capabilities and the building blocks are in. Literally, the profits are going to double, and it's a high free cash flow generating machine. I mean, 2 years out, the total profit should be north of 1,200 crores for this company. So that's how it is going to, and the capex requirements are not that big, in terms of scalability. So your capex in to free cash flow is minuscule. So that would mean that your valuations are going to remain elevated. You can't get these sort of uh, companies at very cheap valuation. You'll never get them. And it's a high quality management. Mr. Sadhu, who has been at the helm of affairs for a very long time, so he understands the company in and out. So this is one name that we like significantly. So on the other hand, you have another player like an IPCA. Again, the stock has gone up 6 times, and there's still some very high room for this company to do well. You have seen how the last 2 years profit numbers for IPCA has shaped. Some blockbuster reporting for FY20 and FY21. Right? So I think they are deploying all of their capital backward integration.
Right.
Go backward as backward as possible in terms of integration. So their strength is low cost manufacturing. So the more you integrate backwards, the better for you. So again, two different sides of the whole equation. On the one hand, you have a low cost manufacturer. On the other hand, you have a high capabilities injectables player. So these are two different competitive advantages, but both are good in their own right. That's how I look. If you see the ESG rankings on ITC, they are ranked triple A or double A, whatever. That's the highest ranking that you can get within an ESG table, right? And my belief is that the color of money is always the same.
Yeah.
Whether the profits from a tobacco business or profits from a metals business or profits from is, and at the end of the day, a stock price will emulate the direction of the dividend payout. So if you
Yes.
have a growing business, the problem with ITC was that the cigarette volumes were not growing, right? Now you have a case when the cigarette volumes will be growing, at least for the next 2 years. And bulk of the capex in your hotels business is over. You really don't have too much capex in the hotels business. You don't want to expand there. Your FMCG business is broadly doing stably well. Their leadership position in Atta, Bingo, and your that cream biscuits, Sunfeast.
Sunfeast.
Yeah, they have 30% market share in each of
Yes.
these three categories, which is their largest FMCG piece, apart from Fiamma de Wells, and they're experimenting a lot in dark chocolates, etc. Also. So I think your FMCG business is self-sustaining in terms of growth. Your tobacco business is growing. Your ESG concerns are, really not in place because the highest rankings in terms of ESG table, and valuations are very reasonable. Absolute amount of dividends are actually going to go up year on year, and valuations are very reasonable. Somewhere down the line, it will happen because it's not an ownership driven company, and you have a professional management which has been rewarded with ESOPs. And obviously, if you want to monetize the full value of your ESOP, that can be created out of demerge. I do believe that there will be a demerger. Of course, you don't know when the time, about the time. But what you can say is that the margin of safety is really high in this business. So that is why we have ITC, and we don't have a significant overweight position or something, but we are just going about at around 2.5% sort of an.
Right.
As far as the SBI is concerned, as I believe that the idea is to buy into large cap financials, and this is the largest bank in the country with 25% of India's banking system. But what really excited me was the third quarter numbers. If you just go back to what State Bank of India reported in terms of third quarter numbers, I mean, they were mind blowing in terms of, either you look at the growth or whether you look at the provisioning, you look at the asset quality. They were within the best in the class when you compare it with other private sector, large cap private sector banks. And the valuations were a fraction, as I'm talking about, one time price to book, and 100 rupees plus, valuations of the subsidiaries. So there was nothing really to lose as far as the overall value of this bank is going to be, on a long term basis. Again, the risk to reward was very favorable. And I think you should just leave BOB and State Bank of India when we classify the other PSU banks, and look at the PSU banks. So I mean, the idea is that we're totally averse to owning PSU bank. I think State Bank of India is a class on its own. I mean, they should be looked at separately. I mean, the managerial cadre out there, the managerial personnel, etc. They're not like the other PSUs. And
Right.
as I believe that it hurt us on the way down, it is benefiting us on the way up. Of course, through its ups and downs or volatility, whatever you may call it. I think risk is to reward is clearly on the positive side, and I just don't want to throw in the towel at the bottom of the valuations. When you know, and these will be beneficiaries of auto component exports, both your Bosch as well as Bharat. There's much more on the upside as opposed to on the downside from a next 3 year point of view in all these three names. Even in HPCL, we were the first ones to book profit when we thought that the valuations were unconducive. At one point in time, HPCL was 18% of the portfolio. One should not mistake, 18% of the portfolio, and we made tons of money. But this sort of valuations at 2% or 3% allocation, I mean, you literally can't lose anything from HPCL at around these levels. I mean, the company itself is buying back some 2,500 crores or 3,000 crores at the maximum price of 250 odd rupees. And I think the earnings outlook, at least for the next 1 year, is north of 100%, 150% sort of a growth rate in profits when you compare it to that. So, I think the idea is to have margin of safety on each of the names that you have in the portfolio. I think there's ample margin of safety. We are having a barbell strategy. Broadly, it's a growth oriented portfolio. But if we see deep value at the end of the spectrum, we have allocations to them as well. You have a HPCL in that regard. You have a Bharat Forge in that regard. You have a Bosch in that regard. So it's an equal balancing act where we find margin of safety broadly in the growth environment. Will have maximum allocation onto that side. But where the downside is protected and there can be a reasonable upside, we have a foothold out there as well. So I think drawdowns is a function of missing profit numbers as well as valuation compression. Missing profit compression, we'll do, and we have been doing all our best to put all our energies to understand how the companies are going to report numbers. And tracking it on a minutely basis, on a 360 degree basis, on a 365-day basis, 24/7, 365 days. That's what our whole energy goes into. So that's an ongoing exercise. But compression in market multiples or individual companies valuation multiples, depending on a lot of local factors, global factors, that's something which is not in our control. So that is why, if our buying stock price is within a reasonable, comfortable zone of 1.5 times, we are not carrying too much of a risk even on the valuations. So that's how we would like to look at it. It's a long only portfolio. We don't hedge anything, so clearly drawdowns are there. But as long as the profit growth numbers do come in and valuations are not very exorbitant, we'll take all those drawdowns in a stride. Unless and until we see that the profit damage is permanent, the company is actually not going to have 18-20% growth rate in profits in the foreseeable future, then maybe we'll take a call to actually exit the particular stock on a lock stock basis. But otherwise, we are good holding this. Colgate is an evergreen play. You see the new management is doing a lot of innovative things. As such, it is a 4 to 6% volume growth category. Right, and they have the single highest spend on advertisement on a single category. 700-800 crores of advertisement is what they do. That's the biggest strength. And but it is also true that beyond a 50 to 55% market share in a product, you really can't expect their market shares to go up. Currently, they have lost market share, and the market share is closer to around 51-52%. But I think Ved Shakti, they're experimenting with hand washes and mouth fresheners, etc., they'll be able to have many leverages when it comes to getting your 15% profit growth. And literally 85-90% of a payout ratio, I think the valuations of 45 times will sustain. In terms of Emami, the problems of the past has been the wholesale nature of business, where they have relied on a distributor model. Reaching out to dealers directly is what they have been focusing on. So they have expanded the dealer network by 10 lakhs over the last 3-4 years. The seasonality of their products, they have a summer portfolio, they have a winter portfolio. Depending on how the summer shapes up, how the winter shapes up, their good fortunes or bad fortunes gyrate. Over the years, they have been able to smoothen out somewhat this stark difference in the nature, but it still remains. And the last of all, the group's leverage at the promoter level, because this was the cash cow, and they leveraged their shareholding in this company to put equity stake in other businesses which they wanted to enter. For example, they wanted to enter paper, so Emami paper, or Emami edible oil, or Emami cement. I mean, they were all leveraged out of pledging the shareholding in Emami Limited to fund the equity infusion into these companies. Now, this has hurt them very, very badly. They have lost 20% of their shareholding in Emami Limited because, liquidity was scarce and the pledgers wanted their money back. So they lost 20% of their shareholding. They have had to sell Emami Cement. They have sold this. So now the pledge position is somewhat comfortable. Next on the block is the hospital business, the Amri. There's been some news flows that Manipal is again interested in buying that their stake in that business. If that goes through, the promoter pledge, which currently stands at around 32-33%, that goes down. Otherwise, the business on itself is a very good business. It's an unleveraged business, so 40%, traditionally 40% ROE business. And it's debt-free, so to speak. And it has consistently been a 40% and ROE and a 40% dividend payout business. I mean, getting this company at these valuations is clearly, not possible. The risk to reward is clearly on the downside. The rewards are much more than the risk. I think bare minimum cases, the fair value of Emami should be around 700. If we get these sort of price levels in Emami, then maybe we'll take a call. Other than that, with this whole ecosystem now meandering towards the Ayurveda, naturals, I mean, they are one of the leaders in this space, along with Dabur. No, I mean, I have an intention to go overweight on pharma and IT even from these. So, that's a position that I am maintaining. Of course, where is the money going to come from will depend on how the components in the portfolio, if we are able to, let's say, take profits off the table in Emami at 700, or a Godrej goes up to 650 or thereabout. It's an intention to go overweight on IT and pharma even. Under-researched segment of the market as far as Indian markets is concerned is between $500 million to $4 billion. There is where the maximum opportunity set lies. The large caps are extremely well researched to 30,000. That segment of the market is broadly under-researched. Market caps more than that are broadly well researched by the market. It really won't have too much of insights, into what the markets don't have. You just be playing the time period, what the markets know and what you know. It's just a time period that you stay in that particular stock. The edge on the research side comes in this mid-cap positioning. It is 47-48%. Yes, there are brief periods like the period we saw in 2017-18, just 15-16 stocks just being a part of the index and doing extremely well in terms of earnings also, and the markets rewarding them also with P multiple expansion. That is how Bajaj Finance becomes a 10 price to book. Now the markets are relenting on letting go some of the valuation. But ultimately, everything comes to a level. Markets are a great leveler in terms of both valuations, mid cap returns, large cap returns, multi cap returns. Over a long 10-year period, you will see all returns will converge. What has gone up will go down, what has not gone up will go up. That is how nature is. There is always a balancing act. We already have L&T, that's very strong PLI on defense. Bharat Forge is a PLI on defense. You already know that the howitzers, the barrels of the howitzers, they're already indigenous program of Tata Projects, Bharat Forge and L&T. That's clearly a defense play that we have. EV, see, sir, the whole thing is that I think hybrid will be a bigger case for India than EV pure.
Right.
Because, if you are burning coal to generate power, you are going to pollute the environment equally badly. And if you turn the entire environment into EV, you are going to require tremendous power. And that source of power comes from burning coal only. So your CO2 emission challenges won't get solved. So I think India will be a case of from IC going to hybrid and then to EV. And within the EV journey, it will be first your three-wheelers, two-wheelers, buses, intracity, intercity, and then it will come to passenger. It's a long journey, and I think the chairman or CEO of Bosch himself is quoted as saying that by the year 2030, Germany is talking about 25% of its total autos going to EVs. 75% will still be IC. So you can jolly well imagine what India's situation will be in this very period. There's still a long way, I would believe, but you again have the same, some contradicting comments coming from Toyota that by 2025 they are going to launch 15 electric vehicles. So everybody in the world is in a hurry to have new electric vehicles. That is a bigger challenge in terms of your, the choice that you'll have for the public per se. But I think in India, IC will be a long-term story in the foreseeable future. Of course, you will have excitement, but the maximum profit pool will still be coming from IC. The health claims, you have Supreme Court rulings and High Court rulings where COVID cases have to be paid 25% higher. So just look at the claims ratio of many of these life insurance companies and your health insurance companies. They will be adversely impacted. You had ICICI Lombard report numbers yesterday.
Right.
These were the very same things that they were talking about, that the claims, their combined ratio has actually gone up because of this pandemic times and courts enforcing that insurance companies need to pay higher amounts. So that's clearly slightly on the negative. At the same time, you'll have many more people wanting insurance, health insurance, the fear of the pandemic, the need for more healthcare budgets, so on and so forth. You'll need more policies, but you'll also see more combined ratio actually going up. Life insurance in any case is a very low penetration sector. It will have a long way to, with or without the pandemic. With pandemic, it will only accelerate slightly in the short term. The markets are the biggest assurance. You will get to see things when they happen. This is just what the past has told us is what we are trying to tell you. In this very year, it was a reliance factor, as I told you. There is no substitute to Reliance. There is a substitute for Infosys or let's say any other name in the index which we can substitute it. But as far as Reliance is concerned, there is no substitute. We don't want to have it, and it's still a part of the index. Second is that this commodities, etc., we will, even though the steel cycle is very strong, it's expected to remain very strong. But as is a philosophy, QGLP, we are opposed to buying global cyclical, and we will stay that course. The performance over the last 13 years has always been a derived number. This is not what we have chased through momentum at any time in the last 13 years. We have followed the process. We have bought growth companies. If the growth has come through, the stock prices have reacted, and that is how we have got the performance. This is what we are going to replicate even going. What the past has told us and how we envisage things as we understand it is what we have put through to you. You may have full liberty to dissect it or not believe it, but I think the markets will be the best judge in the future course of time when we again reevaluate the performance. It's a very stable portfolio, right? If you look at the volatility or swing, even in extreme conditions, is nowhere close to what general portfolios are. See, I think the best for a stable portfolio, you should have returns commensurate to the least amount of risk that you want. This is a portfolio ideal for investors who want to keep risk to the minimum and at the same time be exposed to equity. We don't buy leveraged companies that reduces risk. We don't buy bad managements that reduces risk. We buy growth companies that reduces risk. We buy valuations which are very reasonable that reduces risk. And at the same time, you get the benefits of all and of everything what an equity portfolio should give you. High dividends, decent market cap increase on the portfolio on a sustainable long-term basis. That should be the endeavor. I mean, 15-16% compounded over a 13-year period. I mean, you should expect this sort of a return going forward as well. Outperformance of 4-5%. I think that should be the